in the traditional scale fingerings, the left hand is often at a disadvantage just because of the way the fingerings work. Just mechanically, the way that the left hand has to cross the fourth finger over onto a white note usually, whereas the right hand always gets to cross over the fourth finger and the third finger onto a black note, which kind of is a little easier because you don't have to cross quite as far. You can just land on that black note and it feels a little more natural within the hand.
Welcome to the Piano Sensei Way. I'm your host, Clinton Pratt, and I'm here to help you master the art of running a successful piano teaching studio. Today, we have a special guest, Zac Adamson. So I will welcome him on now. And Zac, tell us a little bit about where you are and what or who you teach.
All right. Thanks, Clinton. I'm currently a master's student. I'm studying at Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah. And so as a master's student, I'm teaching some of the non-music majors who are students at the university who are taking piano lessons. And then I've also recently started teaching at an academic school that they are now offering private piano lessons to some of their students. So they're starting a new program called the Utah Young Artists. So I am one of 3 piano teachers that is working for that school. And I have just 5 students currently with them. So then I also teach a group piano class here at BYU that's for beginning piano for non-music majors. So that's a lot of fun as well.
Okay, yeah, great. I actually visited there once several years ago. Was for the MTNA Collegiate Chapter Symposium thing. I don't know if that's the name, but yeah, it's a beautiful area. I loved seeing the mountains and all that.
Yeah, we have a brand new music building, so it's pretty great.
Nice. So you said you teach non-music majors?
Yep.
So, and is that group or private, or you said both, actually?
Both, yeah. So I have about 7 students right now who are just university students who decided to take piano lessons for whatever reason. So they're at different levels, but they're not studying music, so they're just doing it as kind of a extracurricular or an elective class, basically.
Okay, well that's nice. So hopefully they want to be there.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, well that's nice. Yeah. And just to tell the audience, we kind of met, didn't really meet, I guess, at the recent piano conference, NCKP. I think I saw Zac walking around maybe, but I saw his bio and I saw he had a poster about a topic of scale fingerings, alternate scale fingerings, which is going to be our topic today. And so, but I didn't get a chance to actually talk to you about it there, but we emailed afterwards, and then I thought, hey, come on the podcast, let's talk about it, because this is fascinating. So my podcast is the Piano Sensei Way, and it's sort of, tongue-in-cheek, my way is the best way, so just do it and trust me, and here we go. But yeah, is there one way, right? So this is interesting because is there only one way to do scale fingerings, right? Like I always thought that, you have to do this, you have to start, all the white key scales, are the same, except B is left hand 4 and right F, you have right hand 1, 2, 3, 4, other than that, they're the same. And then you have all these, right? There's all these rules. And then I noticed in the Facebook groups like Piano Teacher Central, there's always controversy, somebody saying, oh, my student played the scale this way, and everybody comments, no, you have to start this scale on this finger or whatever. So tell us why you're interested in this topic. Was it for yourself, for your students, both? How did that all happen?
Yeah, so it first started as an undergrad. I was also studying here at BYU, and for one term during the summer, I had a chance to take lessons from Jeff Shumway, who wasn't normally my teacher, but I had a chance to just take from him just for that summer. And one of the things that he's kind of a math nerd a little bit, and he loves analyzing things. And so one thing that he helped me realize was that in the traditional scale fingerings, the left hand is often at a disadvantage just because of the way the fingerings work. Just mechanically, the way that the left hand has to cross the fourth finger over onto a white note usually, whereas the right hand always gets to cross over the fourth finger and the third finger onto a black note, which kind of is a little easier because you don't have to cross quite as far. You can just land on that black note and it feels a little more natural within the hand. So he actually pulled out this article. He had clipped this article from the Clavier magazine from, I'm reading it right here. It's called Equal Rights for the Left. And it's from 1983. So back in 1983, the author of this article, Frederic Kirchberger, wrote about this topic, how the left hand kind of has this disadvantage. And he proposed alternate fingerings that allow the left hand to follow the same principles as the right hand, that kind of create equality, you could say, between the hands. And so that was my first exposure to it. And I started getting really interested in it. I started practicing these alternate fingerings. I made little diagrams. I was interested in how the fingerings lined up between the hands. Yeah, it just kind of fascinated me. So I ended up using it in my own practicing. And then more recently, I've actually started sharing some of these fingerings with my students, which I think has been helpful. And I'm excited to start using it more in my teaching.
Yeah. So at this point, when you discovered that, I'm assuming you had already been playing scales and you were comfortable with scales using, I guess we'll say, traditional fingering. Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
and
then
I
you were
don't know
just
if I was very comfortable. I was still having some trouble. So it actually helped me because I don't think my skills were to the level that they are now after I can do the traditional fingerings great, and I've been practicing those, but I can also do some alternate fingerings that work really well.
Okay, yeah, that's really interesting. I know, like, before we get into some details and examples, which I'm excited to do, I'm just thinking for myself. Yeah, some of them were always uncomfortable as well, but I really liked B major and F sharp major, especially playing hands together. Right? You do the long fingers on the black keys and thumbs on white keys, and it's just way more easier. So I started actually teaching my students like the first scales that they play hands together. I always started them with B, F sharp, and C sharp. And even though, it might seem harder, like, oh, there's all these sharps, but actually fitting the hands together and all that, right? So, yeah, I'm curious. Well, I know a little bit because I looked at your stuff already, but, we can tell the audience, like, okay, are those changed in your alternate ones, right? Like B, because B seems pretty comfortable already, but maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. I don't know.
No, that's a great point. So those ones are not actually changed. In fact, I totally agree. They're the most comfortable. And I've also taught many students where those are the first ones we learn, or those are the first ones I invite them to learn. And that seems to work really well. Those were always my favorite as well, because I just felt like I could just fly on the keys, and it just felt natural how the thumbs always line up together. And it just felt really good. And I didn't have that feeling of fluidity with the other scales. So I don't know if we want to go into which scales specifically are the alternate ones, and then.
Yeah, let's do it. And
okay,
and just to tell the audience real quick, if you're just listening on the podcast, remember there's a video version on YouTube, The Piano Sensei Way. And especially this one, we're going to show some diagrams, and Zach's actually sitting at the piano as well. So it might be helpful to see it. But if you're just listening audio, that's fine too.
Great. So the first thing I want to actually talk about is how this alternate fingering can actually be used as a way to help students develop a sense of autonomy, of ownership, of figuring something out for themselves, because often it's I think sometimes as a teacher, it's easy for me to just say, do it this way, right? Just learn it, memorize it. But I'm a very, I'm a proponent of the idea if the student can learn how to figure it out on their own and learn the principle behind it, then that principle can be applied to other areas too. So the main principle, if you look at this article, the equal rights for the left, the main principle is that it feels more comfortable to cross over. We're only going to be doing scales with groups of 3 and 4. So we're not even going to be using the pinky unless it's like at the end of the scale, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that means that we're always going to be crossing over the third finger at some point, and then we're going to be crossing over the fourth finger. And depending on what scale it is, if we use the right hand as an example, all of the quote unquote traditional fingerings for the right hand are going to stay the same for these alternate fingerings. And they're the ones that fit most naturally. If you look at E major, for example, you start on E, and then when you get to your third finger is on a black note, the thumb is able to cross under to the A, and the fourth finger just happens to fall naturally on D sharp, which just feels really comfortable. So we can do a blocking pattern of fifth finger on E, 4, 3, 2, 1. We feel that fourth finger on the black note. We cross over, third finger, 3, 2, 1, G sharp, F sharp, E. It just feels comfortable. So I've actually taught my students a lot of times to just, when they're doing hands alone,
Yes.
just cover those positions, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's really nice for the right hand. And it turns out for the left hand, this fingering already works really well. So we don't have to change this. We can use the traditional fingering because it fits really nicely in the left hand. I have pinky on E. Fourth finger naturally just happens to be on F sharp, which is a black note, which is what we want. And then the third finger crosses over onto C sharp. So I can practice the block.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just, I'm just talking about hands separately for now.
Mm-hmm.
If we go to the ones that we're going to be focusing on that are going to change for the left hand are C major, G major, D major, and A major. And then also on the flat side, F major. So these 5 scales are going to be mostly the ones that we're focusing on for the equal rights for the left hand. Those are the ones where, if you look at D major, for example, the right hand gets to play third finger on F sharp, fourth finger on C sharp, which is really nice because you know where to cross over the fourth finger right onto the black note and the third finger right on to the black note. But the left hand is kind of like, I mean, if you look at our hands are not parallel. Our hands are a mirror image. But yet the scale fingerings that are traditional don't really take that mirror image into account. So what you end up with is you have to cross the fourth finger onto an E, which is a white note, and then third finger onto a B, and then you get these black notes that are just kind of thrown in there, and you just have to recognize where they are, but they don't actually, in the right hand, they're kind of like little checkpoints, right? You can feel where the beginning of that block starts with the black note. 4, 3, 2, 1, fourth finger on C sharp, 3, 2, 1. You can kind of feel that. In the left hand, it just kind of feels awkward. You have to have a fourth finger on the white note, and there's not really any indicator that helps me to kind of visualize where those blocks start.
Right. Yes. Let me jump in for a second, Zach. This is fascinating because, yeah, left hand for D, you can still practice blocking it, like you said, but it is a little awkward. And I was just helping a student with this last week, D major, and I think we were doing mostly just hand separate, 2 octaves. And then like, hey, for, if you want to try both hands together or whatever. But before we even got there, left hand, he was okay ascending, but then descending, he kept wanting to put his thumb every time after a black key.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm going to do it just so I can feel it. But D coming down, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, and interrupted him once. I'm like, no, it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, and then he tried it and struggled again. And then, I remembered the alternate idea. And I thought to myself, wait, why can't he do that? Like it's fine. And it's like B minor too, B natural minor. That's how you would do that, is thumb on the B. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 4, 1, 2, 3. Right. And so I just kind of let him do it. I'm like, yeah, okay, just put your thumb after the black key. And yeah, it was way easier.
That's so interesting. So he kind of naturally, maybe intuitively
Mm-hmm.
felt that it was easier. And I didn't mention it makes it easier to cross over onto black keys, right? Fourth and third finger,
Yeah.
but also makes it easier to tuck under going the other way. Because if I'm tucking under the third finger, if my third finger is on C sharp, it's easy to tuck under onto the B because the third finger is elevated a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then fourth finger on F sharp. And then you might ask, well, then we don't start on the pinky, right? And that feels, we're so used to starting pinky on the bottom and then fourth finger and so on. And so that is, I guess you could say that's a trade-off. But I think it's helpful to learn this principle and actually know how to play both the traditional and the alternate, because in different settings in repertoire pieces, I've used both of them when they've been sometimes felt more comfortable.
Yeah, and we don't always do fifth finger left hand starting on the black keys. So, right, it's just, and maybe we spend too much time teaching students like just the white key scales and everything is 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, right? And then you start doing a black key one and oh my gosh, we're not starting on 5. It's the end of the world. Yeah, so maybe just forget that idea. You don't have to start on 5. You just want to find the comfortable groupings, right? Of where is your 1, 2, 3 and 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
And side note, I always simplify it, and sometimes I make other teachers mad because I say every single scale, major, minor, right hand, left hand, going up, going down, doesn't matter. Every single scale is 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. And people are like, no, it's not. You start on 3. But my point is, it's in there somewhere, right? There's a 1, 2, 3 and a 1, 2, 3, 4. You might be starting on the 3 and going down or whatever, but it's still, everything's groups of 3s and 4s because 3 plus 4 is 7, and that's how many notes are in a scale.
It's like it's always that cycle, but you're just starting that cycle on a different spot. And that's really helpful to recognize that as well.
Yeah. So is that the alternate fingering for D left hand?
Yes. So in the article equal rights for the left, that's the one that he proposes, where you would actually start D on your second finger, which would allow you to put fourth finger on F sharp, and then it just flows really nice and you can kind of feel how that works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. I'm kind of fingering it myself silently at the piano, and then do you want to talk about hands together too? Because I'm trying that too, and it's like 2, 1 and 1, 2, so that feels kind of good. And then
so
black key is 3 and 4, but yeah, I can do it pretty easily. Yeah.
So this comes to the hands together part. You mentioned B major, which is really easy to block these hands together.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did was I took the article and then I made these color-coded blocking patterns that you can kind of see that naturally how the fingers fit together. And it's kind of, you can kind of see the symmetry of it too, how the left hand going down is the same as the right hand going up if you start at a certain point.
Let me share that.
Yeah, so let's actually go to the blue one.
On the next page.
Yeah, next page. So the blue group I'm showing here, this is already the traditional fingering, what we normally do for B major, like you were saying. But I'm just showing how you can group them. So on that top one, I have B, right hand starts on thumb, and then we have 2, 3, and 3, 2, the block together, and then thumbs on E, and then 2, 3, 4, 4, 3, 2.
Mm-hmm.
And the little black line and the black box are the two different points of symmetry. So you can kind of see actually if if you go to the 3 on G sharp, if you were to go up from G sharp in the right hand and down from G sharp in the left hand, it would be the symmetrical fingering. So you would be doing
Oh,
like
okay.
this.
Yeah,
Same
yeah.
thing with 2, 3, and 3, 2. If you start on the 2, 3, and 3, 2, and I go up and out. So if I'm going outwards, right hand goes up, left hand goes down. Oh, sorry, that would be, I was playing F sharp, but for
Yeah.
B.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
So that's how I invite my students to practice it hands together. Put your thumbs together, and also be aware you can substitute out like the 4th finger for the first one. But for most of them, it's going to be thumb, unless it's more convenient to start with the 4th finger in the left hand. I just try to be aware that 4th finger is not actually part of this pattern. It's going to be repeating.
Right.
It's something that's convenient, a way to start it.
Right, because then it feels like 4 3 2 1, 4 3 2 1, right? And like, wait, I thought it was all alternating groups of 3s and 4s. Yeah, and that's how I teach my students too. It's a group of 4. It's just, if you want to start on 4, it's just because 4 happens to be the next finger that's there at the end, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Also, yeah, this is interesting because I usually have my students practice, contrary motion scales too. And some of them are hard, like B is actually hard, right, if you're actually starting on the B, because the thumbs happen at different times. But this is interesting. It would be good too, I think, but you let me know. Practicing contrary motion, from the tonic, but also from like the point of symmetry.
Yeah.
And maybe they have to figure that out, right? Like, where is it going to be the symmetrical fingering? Where would you start?
Yeah. Yeah, so it can be really cool to play around with it. So just kind of looking at how this would look like, I could start with, I'm not even going to do the 4th finger in the left hand. I'm just going to start thumb, thumb. And those are the blocks. So that's why I have them kind of spaced out. So whenever there's that white space, that would be a time to pause. And then I like to have my students cover the next block before they actually play it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a carpenter, right? Like, measure twice, cut once.
Yeah.
If you just check it a few times, and then when you actually play it, you'll nail it the first time because you already covered it and can feel the tops of the keys. Cover, play, jump to the next one, cover the thumbs, make sure they're covered. So this is just a really great way to have students practice it so they're feeling the hand positions. I think the way that we kind of divert to sometimes is just, and we immediately start practicing like that, and we're not thinking in terms of blocks and how they're. Do you think about language and how we speak in little phrases and chunks, and we see words, and our brains process things in blocks. So I think it's just more helpful to see these blocks and really feel what they feel like this. And then when I add everything, it's a lot easier to feel it, how it flows together. My idea was like, we have these blocks for B and F sharp. Why don't we figure out what feels natural for the other ones? And where's the point of symmetry for these ones?
Do you want to connect with other teachers in person? Do you want to learn new teaching strategies and explore outside-the-box approaches? Join us at the Creative Teaching Conference, a radical retreat to recharge and reinvigorate your teaching. This unique conference was started by me and my 2 friends and colleagues, Christopher Oil and Tony Parlapiano, back in the summer of 2022. All 3 of us had so many ideas we wanted to share, but instead of trying to get selected for an MTNA or NCKP conference, we created our own event. We each present a few workshops, but we also have guest presenters as well. Topics include improvisation, composition, student-led learning. You'll experience inspiring workshops on creative teaching strategies and creative performance ideas. Learn about different ways to structure lessons, such as online groups, memberships, and subscription models. We eat meals together and plan social time so you can connect with teachers from all over the country, forming new musical friendships that will last a lifetime. Mark your calendars for July 7 to 9, 2024 in Cincinnati, Ohio. Check out creativeteachingconference.com for more info.
So C is actually really easy. I just taught this to a student recently, and she was like, "Oh, this is way easier than the traditional fingering." So you just have to do 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1 on C, D, E. So it's just really simple to put those together. And then starting at the left hand on F, fourth finger on F, thumb on F. And this is a really easy one to just teach students. And it's a lot easier than trying to remember where does the fourth finger cross in the left hand, then it's not lined up with the right hand and they cross different spots. It's just kind of easy to visualize this. So that's the C one that fits pretty well in C. And they're all white notes. So I mean, you could technically do any of these fingerings, these blocking patterns, and use it in C because you're not restricted by black notes. But that's kind of the one that I've used, and that's what he suggests in the article.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
And if you want to do contrary, I would start right hand thumb on C, left hand thumb on E.
Yeah.
And then that's really fits well within the hands. Then the next one would be G. And since there's only one black note, we want to favor the fourth finger. We want to make sure fourth finger gets a chance to cross over onto the black note. So basically for G and also for F, since they both have one black note, all you have to do is say, make sure the fourth finger lands on the black note. And all the other fingers, they end up in groups of 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3. So G major, you could practice. That's one block. That's one block. Then fourth fingers. And this is kind of a cool finger. I mean, it feels different, but it works pretty well.
Yeah. And then what do you, so for when you get to the top of the left hand,
I would probably do like a 3 on F sharp, and then, or even like a 2 on F sharp.
Yeah.
I think I do like 3 because it feels easier to cross over onto a 3 than onto a 4 when I don't actually need to cross onto a 4.
Right.
If I'm just ending on G at the top.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. I know there could be an argument for, well, use the 4 anyway, because then when you do a 3-octave scale or a 4-octave scale, continue the pattern. So
yeah, that's a good point.
I see that too, but yeah, I know what you're saying too, is as long as you know, right? Like it's all about awareness of what's going on and knowing the pattern, and yeah, that's good.
Yeah, and then F is kind of similar. It's pretty intuitive. So you'd start off 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, left hand 3, 2, 1, right hand 1, 2, 3, block it, and then you immediately get the fourth finger, both fourth fingers on B flat. And then if you're ending that one, the same kind of thing, like use whatever fingering is convenient if you're stopping on the top, and you don't have to necessarily keep the pattern if you're just turning around at the top.
Yeah. Okay.
So that brings us to D major, which this one gets a little more complicated, but it's actually pretty easy to explain. So I like you mentioned before, the 2 and the 1 and the 1 and the 2 go together. So I call this the chopsticks thing. Like if students know how to play, if they think chopsticks, and I just tell them like, you could, just explain that's a whole step, and we're just going to do like a chopsticks thing, but on D and E with both hands. And now the part that gets kind of confusing is now the third, on the first black note, the F sharp, the right hand is going to be on 3 and the left hand is going to be on 4. So you just kind of have to remember. And what I like to do is I try to visualize, well, the fourth, I'm doing a fourth in the left hand because I want to get to the 3, 2, 1 block, which is coming up right next. And in the right hand, I'm tucking the thumb under, so I don't need a 4 for the right hand.
Yeah. And that's kind of like, and I see the next one, B flat, we're used to doing that with B flat, right? I've told my students, like, if one hand is the 3 on the black key, the other one is the 4, right there. It's always one is on the 3, one is on the 4. So
Yeah,
so with this, it's the same idea for D major, just on the F sharp and C sharp. So
exactly.
left hand 4, left hand 3, right hand 4. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it should feel very similar to B flat, except the positioning of the black notes is kind of reversed, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're on the sharps. So
Yeah.
yeah, which is kind of cool because if you practice D major in the right hand going up, and then if you practice B flat major in the left hand going down, starting on D,
Yeah.
which would technically be like B flat, the mode of the Phrygian mode, I guess you could say, since starting on the 3rd scale degree. So B flat Phrygian and D major in the right hand. It's like the perfect.
Yeah.
repetition.
Right. It's not just symmetrical fingering, but it's symmetrical intervals or spacing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's weird. It's so easy, but it sounds complex.
Yeah. It feels, if you try it, it's so easy. And you can do that. You can do that with all these. G and F are the same way you could do an exact reflection.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's D has that kind of chopsticks thing, and then 4 in the left, 3 in the right, and the next one is just 1 2 3 3 2 1, which is very similar to the blocks we've used before for C and F, C, G, and F. And then just switch now 4 in the right, 3 in the left. So I just practice when I'm practicing this blocking. I just get really good at doing those blocks before I even try to start. And what that does is in my mind, it associates the blocks with those positions so that when I start playing like this, it doesn't turn into like just a lot of soup mixed up in my head of like, where do the designations start of how these blocks work together? And I'm just hoping that the right and the left hand line up and land at the last note together, but they'll probably get lost on the way sometimes. So that's kind of what I've noticed too, is this helps with keeping the hands very riveted together, like little checkpoints along the way where, okay, the chopsticks always line up 1 2 2 1 every single time on the way up. So it's kind of like a checking to make sure that they don't get asynchronous on the way up, and slightly left hand is slightly slower, faster than the right hand.
Right. Yeah. And I'm sure we've all experienced students who are struggling with a scale and they're going really slow. And the mindset is like, okay, what's the next note and which finger? Oh, okay. And what's the next note and which finger? Okay. It's very labor intensive, right? Because it's just note by note versus, if you practice the blocks and you've got the 4 in the left hand, then it sort of becomes automatic. Like 4, okay, the next one, it's just the next finger. You just go to the 3, go to the 2, go to the 1. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I love that idea because it's like when I read, I don't sound out every single word. My brain just immediately sees a block because I've trained it to see that block of letters as a word. And then I can even see blocks of words as like common phrases, right, that are just so easy to recognize. Yeah. And so that's what I want to help my students really develop, that patterning in the brain.
Yeah. I wonder if there maybe just one more that you want to point out.
I do want to look at the yellow one, the E major.
Okay.
Because this one actually, this is cool because if you learn this pattern, you can actually, it's the same pattern as, like we said at the beginning, E major does not change. It is the traditional fingering already.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just learning the blocking pattern for this. And then you can actually transpose it to C, G, D, A to learn the traditional fingerings, but do them in a way that even though the black notes aren't in those positions, you can still feel kind of how it's the same blocks, right?
Oh, okay. Right. I see what you're saying.
So like if I learn E major, I'm going to block the thumbs together, and I've got this block where it's 2 3 and 4 3 in the left hand, so the third fingers always line up, which is nice. Mm-hmm. And then I've got the chopsticks thing in the center, 1 2 and 2 1, and then third fingers line up again with 4 and 2. So once I get those blocks down, I can transpose that to C. And now I'm doing the traditional fingering for C. but I'm doing it in a way that's a lot more intentional than just hoping that I can remember it through muscle memory.
Yeah, okay. But would you still prefer or recommend the alternate fingering for C where your left hand starts on 3?
Yeah, I think I would
Yeah.
prefer that one,
Yeah.
but it could depend on the context. Like if I'm playing a piece where it's more convenient to start on the fifth finger in the left hand for a certain passage, then I'd probably want to just use the E major fingering, which is the one that most of us have been taught. So
Yeah, and I did want to bring that up again because I remember you saying that earlier. Within a passage or within the context of a certain piece, you might use a different fingering, and yeah, I think that's good and helpful just in general as a concept, right? Like, oh, you might be playing a Kulau sonata or something, and there's this scale run, and it's got one sharp, so it's kind of like G major, but maybe it doesn't start on the G or whatever, right? And so we're trying to
yeah,
figure out the fingering pattern, and it might not be that the G is the 1 and the A is the 2, etc.
yeah, that's a great point.
Mm-hmm.
And so these blocking patterns can kind of help to be more intentional with that, and that if I do cross the fourth finger onto a white note, I can at least kind of be aware of how it's lining up with the other hands, with the right hand. So yeah, I really like that idea.
All right. Well, are you willing to share this document with these diagrams with our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. I have another question. Maybe as we get close to wrapping up, have you had students who either you taught the traditional fingerings or they already knew them, and then you started using these? And I don't know, maybe do you have any examples of a student who, did it help them, or were they confused, or did they abandon the old ones, or what happened?
Yeah, so one example I can think of is recently, just last week, I noticed my student was kind of struggling with scale fingerings, and she would get through the scale, but it would be like different fingerings each time and would kind of just be haphazard. So I showed her the C major one, where it's just 3 2 1 1 2 3, and I took her through the blocking pattern, and once you could tell it kind of started to click for her, she's like, "Oh, I can see how this lines up," and it was just like I could tell new neural pathways were being built. So I was really happy about that, and I'm excited to see her this week because I haven't that's pretty new, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna see if that's helpful for her. Um, and I've a few other students I've introduced it to, but I want to keep working on it with my students and using it more often.
Yeah, I'm excited to try it with students, and um, yeah, I'm interested too what other teachers think about this. I know sometimes it can be controversial. I don't know why. I mean, it's just a scale. It's scale. It's just fingering, but I don't know. It can be a hot topic. Like, no, you have to use this finger on this note. Yeah, sometimes I know just like a general teaching philosophy that I like is let the student discover it, let them explore and figure out. Maybe they have trouble, and maybe I can help them. You know, so they might have some wonky, crazy fingering that is difficult. And so yeah, normally I would just ask them like, is there a way that could be easier? And I'm wondering, I should do an experiment if they would just happen upon like these same alternate fingerings, right? Like I said, my one student just kind of automatically did his thumb after a black key every time going down in the left hand.
Yeah, that's something I want to try too, because back to that idea of learning, if the student learns a principle and then figures it out on their own, they'll probably learn it better than if I just say, do this, right? So I haven't really tried this fully. I've explained it to some of my students, but I want to just go to a student who has never learned how to finger scales and say, this is the principle. Try to always make sure third, fourth finger cross over onto black notes, and then see if they can kind of figure it out on their own. I think that would be a fun experiment. I've done that a little bit in some ways with students, where I try to ask them, okay, if you want the fourth finger to be here, what fingers would you have to put preceding that in order to lead up to it. And so then it kind of makes them think a little bit more about it rather than just memorize the pattern, check the box. Okay, I have that one memorized, and then I'm not using as much activity in my brain to really explore it.
Right. All right. Well, this has been really helpful and fascinating. Zac, is there anything else that you wanted to say or promote, or any last thoughts?
No, thank you, Clinton. I really appreciate this opportunity, and I'm on a journey of discovery with this and working with my students. So I'd be really interested and hopeful that it can benefit other people as well.
Great. Well, thanks for coming on, and to the audience, hope this was helpful. Let me know if you have any questions or thoughts about this. I would love to hear your ideas and whatnot. And this has been the Piano Sensei Way. Take care.